Hello, welcome to Jazz Is
Jazz's
MasterClass series
at the National Jazz Museum at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem.
I am Sekou McMillan, the curator of special projects.
My name is Albert Marquès.
Zach O'Farrell.
My name is Shirazette Titten.
and we are in conversation with the legendary Bertha Hope. Jazz could only have happened here in America.
The key to everything was the radio.
So this world is too dense. 15 minutes isn't enough to cover it all.
Are you ready? I am.
Improvised music, jazz, has the power to transcend words and just give a feeling, an emotion that makes you... Hello everybody and welcome to Jazz's Masterclass series at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. Today we will talk about jazz and social justice. My name is Albert Marquès. You're probably hearing an accent. I am from Spain, from a part of Spain called Catalonia, and I've been now living in New York City for 10 years. I also lived in France. I've been in the West Bank, in Palestine, in Cuba, and everywhere where I've been, I've mixed jazz with some kind of activism. It is an honor. It is an honor to be part of those series, and I'm hoping that we will not just learn about what other people have done or what I've done as a musician and activist, but that hopefully this will encourage some of you, if you are musicians or artists, to also continue this beautiful tradition and engage in basically making the world a better place with this beautiful music called jazz. Part one, jazz and social justice. There are so many examples in jazz history that show how jazz musicians felt compelled to make an artistic statement that was to a certain degree, we could call it political. And by no means I want to say that this is the selection of the most important ones. I just chose a few that I think that are meaningful in jazz history and personally for me. One where we will all agree is Strange Fruit. Strange Fruit was originally called Bitter Fruit. It was a poem written by a communist, a Jewish man that lived in New York City. And it's important to remember that between the end of the 19th century until the 1950s, it is estimated that more than 4,000 Black people were publicly murdered, lynched. He was looking at pictures of those events. Particularly, he was looking at a case where a mob took two very young men, sometimes that happened to teenagers too, out of a police station and beat them up to death while the crowd and the authorities witnessed it without doing anything. In 1937, the poem was written, and it's in 1939 that Billie Holiday here in New York, in the first jazz club, in fact, that integrated Black and white audiences, learned about it and performed it. Time magazine would call in 1999 Strange Fruit the song of the century. Now we look at all these cases and it seems obvious, right? That was the right thing to do. Who was in favor of such things? Well, there were very severe consequences. Any jazz musician back then, and I could argue even nowadays, that takes such statements is taking a huge risk, and this kind of activism affects the amount of work, the income that you will have. In the case of Billie Holiday, the director of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, that was very openly racist white men would punish her to a degree that she would end spending 1 year in prison, and she lost the license that allowed her to do performances. So such political statements had huge consequences. It's important to also remember that the labels a lot of times rejected this kind of songs because they didn't want to upset certain customers, or they thought that in certain states, in this case the South, there would be some kind of retaliation against their albums. Fables of Fables by Charles Mingus is probably one of the also most important examples. As you might probably know, in the 1950s there was this case in Little Rock High School, as you can see in the picture. The governor of Arkansas, that by the way was a Democrat, deployed the National Guard outside of Little Rock High School to prevent a group of 9 students to attend a class in a school that was integrating white and black students. The Supreme Court of the United States had said that the 14th Amendment protected the right of students to attend any school, and some governors, like this one, rejected the idea. And the incident was televised, and Eisenhower, the president of the United States, ended deploying the U.S. Army and also taking control of the Arkansas National Guard to make sure that those students were allowed to attend class in the school that they wanted to go. In the middle of all of this, Charles Mingus created this masterpiece that has some elements of avant-garde jazz from the time period. It's important to say that the song has lyrics, very explicit lyrics, and the label refused to include the lyrics on the song. I think it's 3-4 years later that he could publish the song with the lyrics that he had written for it. Another very important example of jazz and social justice is the Freedom Now Suite. In fact, if you look at the cover of the album that you can see here, obviously you can make the connection to the civil rights movement and when the activists were sitting down in cafeterias to fight against restaurants that were for whites only. So the cover itself is very explicit. I want to say that the name of the album, the Freedom Now Suite, is precisely what will inspire Keith Lamar, that I will be talking about later, to call the project Freedom First. But I'll talk about this in the next section. The first song of the album, Driver Man, has Abbie Lincoln, and it has very explicit lyrics about the life of a slave. This album also, I want to say that all the examples that I'm talking about are really good music. This is very, very high level, amazing jazz that was also pushing the boundaries. In this case of Max Roach, they were exploring new sounds that at that time, now maybe they don't sound that edgy, but I think that they still do, but they were revolutionary, not only in the message that they were giving, but also as composers and musicians. In 1963, a white supremacist terrorist organization called the Ku Klux Klan put a bomb in a black church in Birmingham, Alabama, that would end with the murder of 4 black girls. Even if John Coltrane never said it, it's an understanding among the musicians of the time period and historians that when John Coltrane soon after composed and started playing the piece Alabama, it was a reaction, or it was a statement related to that terrorist attack. This is also probably one of the most powerful examples of how jazz, how music can... There are incidents like killing 4 girls that are unspeakable. It's hard to find the words to talk about those things. I think that sounds, music, improvised music, jazz, has the power to transcend words and just give a feeling, an emotion that makes you understand the situation and somehow within it find a peace, a hope, surrounded by rage and violence. I personally think that Alabama by John Coltrane is one of the most incredible jazz compositions ever written, and the rage and the hope within every note that this legendary quartet play. Watch it, listen to it if you don't know the piece. I want to insist, this is just a selection. There are so many examples. There are also a lot of contemporary examples. And I want to finish this section mentioning Charlie Haydn. As I said in the introduction, I am from Spain. In fact, Charlie Haydn with the Liberation Orchestra even played the anthem of Catalonia, this part that I am from Spain. And this song that I'm showing you now here, it's La Pasionaria, which is the name of a woman who was one of the leaders of the Spanish resistance against Franco's fascist coup d'etat that happened between 1936 and 1939 in the Spanish Civil War. I've been saying, and I want to say it again, that even if we look at those examples nowadays and it seems like, oh, of course, they were in the right side of history, all these people paid a very high price for their statements. Let me just give you an example to close this section with Charlie Haydn. In the 1970s, he played in a jazz festival in Portugal. Portugal was then led by a fascist dictator called Salazar. And during one of the concerts, he openly supported the African independentist movements in Angola and Mozambique. When he ended the gig, he disappeared. Nobody could find him. Hours later, they discovered that the secret services of Portugal had arrested him. We know that somehow the US government, the Department of State, got involved, and thanks to the US intervention, here you have an example of a jazz musician that was arrested and was going to be prosecuted. Who knows what they were going to do to him, and thanks to the intervention of the United States, he was liberated and brought to the United States. I could continue talking for hours about the many incredible examples that exist of jazz and social justice in jazz history, in this beautiful music called jazz. But in the next sections, I want to talk a little bit about the projects that I'm doing, because I'm really hoping that if we have any artists or musicians watching this, that you will see that all of this is still, a lot of those things are still happening, and a lot of things need to be done, and that we can actually do it.